What's down, people, and welcome back to another episode of Ghetto Gospel. So where we left off at. Last week, we talked about Abraham serving up a plate for God and them dudes that he was walking with. We also talked about God promising Abraham that he was gonna have a son by his wife Sarah, and how Sarah laughed when God said it. And now we caught up. So we gonna pick chapter 18 back up at verse 16. And the first thing it say is that the men we talked about last episode stood up and looked at this city named Sodom. Now if you was paying attention to episode 30, you'll remember that this the city where Abraham the nephew set up shop at. We're gonna talk more about that next episode. So then in verse 17, it say that God started saying some stuff. And when I look at the original language, I can't tell whether God was saying this stuff out loud, like what Abraham could hear, or just thinking to himself. And what God said, maybe thought, was,
should I hide what I'm about to do from Abraham? Him and his people about to power up on these folks. And all the nations gonna be blessed through him. I mean, I chose him because I know he gonna teach everybody in this house to keep my way and to do the right thing and treat people fair and whatnot. That's how I'm gonna bring my promise to him.
Then God was like,
well, I'm gonna tell you, Abe, it's a bunch of sin popping off in Sodom and Gomorrah, and I've been hearing a lot of noise about it. So I'm gonna go on down there and see if it's as bad as they've been saying it is.
So then, the men that showed up with God bounced and headed for Sodom and left God and Abraham to chop it up. So then Abraham came at God like, God, you really gonna wipe out them righteous folks right along with the wicked ones? And I'm gonna take a pause right there. What made Abraham think God was gonna wipe them folks out? God ain't say that. And from what we done read so far, Abraham ain't seen nothing that might make him think God would take it that far. He wasn't around back in Genesis 7 when God flooded the earth. So what'll make him think that God was about that drama like that? I got a couple of theories, but here at Ghetto Gospel, we try real hard not to lean on nothing that ain't written in black and white. So let's just talk about what we know. At this point in the book, Abraham had been rolling with God for at least 24 years. He was 75 when he actually left Quran like God told him to. And in this chapter, he at least 99. And that whole time period ain't nothing but 7 chapters. It's people who literally got whole books written about a couple of years of their life. Heck, the American Civil War wasn't but 5 years long. And people then wrote whole books about how the Confederacy gonna rise again. Like, Phineas and Ferb had a longer run in the Confederacy. Clone Wars had a longer run in the Confederacy. Bow Wow's rap career had a longer run in the Confederacy. The point is, a lot of stuff could happen in 24 years. A lot more than you could fit in 7 chapters. So we don't know what exactly Abraham saw in them 24 years that he was walking with the Lord that made him jump straight to the conclusion that God was gonna wipe out all of them sinners in Sodom and Gomorrah. We do know that when God told him to circumcise himself and everybody in his house, he did it. God did something to convince him that it was better to listen to him than to be like, nah, I'm good. Not to mention that Abraham was the first person in the Bible who would tell us God appeared to. So you gotta imagine that he knew God better than just about anybody else at this point. So if he think God might wipe this city out, he probably got a good reason for thinking that. Spoiler alert, he absolutely had a good reason for thinking that. So back to this conversation with God and Abraham. Abraham was like, what if it's 50 righteous people in the city? You ain't gonna spare the city for them 50 people? You wouldn't kill them 50 righteous folks with the wicked folks and treat them all the same. You the judge of the whole earth. I know you wouldn't do something like that. And that tell us something important. Somewhere in them unwritten 24 years, Abraham learned that God is the judge of the whole earth. How he came to that conclusion? I'll leave that to your imagination. I ain't found it written nowhere in here yet, but God also didn't correct him on it. So then God told Abraham,
if I find 50 people in the city that's righteous, I'll spare the whole city for their sake.
And you would think Abraham would be like, all right, cool. But what happened next is this dude start going back and forth, trying to negotiate with God. Like, what if it's 45? You gonna destroy them because they 5 short?
I'll save the city for 45.
What about 40?
Okay.
What about 30?
Alright.
What about 20?
I'll save the city for 20.
What about 10?
I'll save the city if it's only 10 righteous people in it.
And after God finished talking to Abraham, he bounced and Abraham went home. And that's the end of the chapter. So what we get from all of this? First of all, we talking about God. If he really wanted to know what was going on in that city, he ain't need to go down there. So it must have been another reason. He just so happened to be passing by Abraham's crib on the way to go check it out. When you realize God got a plan and a reason for doing everything he do, you will also recognize that you reading or hearing about the stuff that he did a long time ago ain't no accident either. If you just so happen to be reading about it, hearing about it, or watching a video about it, is something he trying to tell you too. The other thing is, God knew exactly how many righteous folks it was in that city. He could have just stopped Abraham and been like, I'ma do what I'ma do, little homie. But he ain't do that. He was patient and let Abraham go through this whole little episode of trying to wheel and deal with God. Another thing it tell us is that God was willing to spare a whole city for a few people. The fact that God, who Abraham just called the judge of the whole earth, cared enough about a handful of people to spare a whole evil city tell us a whole lot about who he is. And that's more important than it seemed on the surface. Y'all know I don't normally skip ahead, but I got to right here. Way later in the book, God gets to talking about how he feel about injustice and mistreating folks. And one of the things that he says is that he don't change. I don't know the exact time frame, but it's at least 500 years after he told Abraham to treat people right. And I feel like it's probably double that. What that tell us is that God care about people. He care about people being mistreated. And he patient with us while we wrestle with the fact that we don't like to see people suffer, whether they the righteous or the wicked. So that's it for this week. I'll see y'all next week. And as always, peace, and I hope y'all people straight.